Okay, we'll talk about that afterwards.
Okay, got it. Sounds good.
Hello, everyone. Well, look at, there's me laughing my face off. Okay. Okay, so we are here doing Chattin with CHAP live today. And I have, so it's, what day is today? It's a Thursday. Today's Thursday. And it's 4 o'clock, so it's much later than we normally do Chattin with CHAP, but I'm still Ginger, your host. And here we are. And today I have Sarah Collins with us, which if you have been to any of our recent conferences or our Learning Difference conference, you ought to run into Sarah at any of those. So she is a good friend and she has some really awesome information to share with us today, but I will let her start by telling us, oh wait, I need to do a commercial first. So we have the convention coming up. If you did not know, the convention is going to be at the New York Expo this year on June 10 and 11. So registration is live. I know a lot of you have been emailing and asking about that. It is live right now. For a whole nother week, you get early bird pricing. And then after that, it goes to pre-event pricing, and then there's at-door pricing. So conv.chaponline.com is where you want to go for that information. You can also go to chaponline.com, it'll take you there. So anyway, you want to come, we'll all be back together. Awesome. So yes, I encourage you all to check it out if you've never been at a convention for sure, and come back and say hi, because it would be good to get back together again. So without further delay, let's get to know Sarah a little bit. Sarah, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I would love to. So I'm Sarah Collins, obviously. I am an occupational therapist by trade. I worked for several years in all different kinds of places, partially in the hospital, and then I worked home health care, and it was actually through home health care that I saw a family who was homeschooling. I was at their house, and talk about intervention, right? So I was at their house, and this the mom who was homeschooling, she was like, Sarah, I've got to tell you about this homeschooling thing. And I was like, yeah, that's great, but I work full time and my kids are in school and whatever. And at that point, I think, we lived in Maryland, and my daughter was, I don't know, I have to think back, it was a very long time ago. My daughter was in 3rd grade, my son was in kindergarten. And I was working again full time, and then I had my youngest was 1, and so I kind of saw what her house looked like and how it was different than mine, and how I was dropping them off, and then I was going to work, and then we have to pick them up, and we're going to field hockey and to, I don't know, swimming and soccer and yada yada everywhere, and I just really loved the beauty of what was happening in her home. And within 3 months, after that, my husband had started a new job up here in Pennsylvania, and we were moving. And I said, now's the time to get started. And my husband thought I was absolutely crazy. And he really, we subscribe to some of those stigma of what is homeschooling. It's, how are you going to socialize your children and all of that. And, but we worked through it, and that was 6-7 years ago now. And so here we are. And so now I work specifically with families, homeschooling families, on occupational therapy and how to kind of integrate OT into their homeschools. And it's absolutely lovely. I work through, most recently, I've just been doing a whole series on handwriting, and so I run some focus groups. I do some private consultations. And it's the best of both worlds for me.
That's awesome. I love that. So are there a lot of OTs out there working with the homeschool community? Or is it kind of like through the school and that's it? Or
nope, there are not.
So we're pretty rare.
I'm it. Basically, it's actually been really, really interesting. I've been working kind of from both sides of it, talking to occupational therapists about what is homeschooling, and then talking to homeschoolers about what is occupational therapy. So kind of bridging the gap of that. You can you get occupational therapy through the school district, depending on your school district here in Pennsylvania. In fact, my son, this is actually hysterical. We took him in to get, this was a couple years ago, and he was really struggling with reading and writing, primarily because of his vision. And I wanted to go in and get some testing, and he qualified for occupational therapy there. And they offered me one time a month, or offered us one time a month. I was like, that's all right. I think I can handle that at home. Like, what's your one time a month going to do? But you can for sure. It depends on the school district here and how they kind of interpret the laws.
Yeah, absolutely.
But here in Phoenixville, we were offered that lovely opportunity. But you can also go through the medical model and get, depending on if your kiddo has a diagnosis or whatever. But at that point, going through the medical model, you're going to probably end up in a clinic. And so I've developed a course, and I teach occupational therapists about homeschooling, so that when you go into these clinics, which are fantastic, but when you go in there, you're not getting that. How do you socialize your kid? And you school so that you can get all the services, and you're not going to get that, because it's not true. And so that's what that course does, is we go through the theories of homeschooling. We go through some of the homeschool stigma. We go through the research of homeschooling and social skills, and how occupational therapy can play into homeschooling, specifically working with families. So
wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So if you are looking for direct occupational therapy, I have a list of providers. So come at me, I'll get them for you.
That's awesome. Okay, so our title today was, I can't remember what I typed on there, but it was like pretty much like, what is the importance of play? Does play matter for your children? So I heard Sarah talk on this once, and I was like, wow, like it was really eye-opening, and I just want to scream it from the rooftops, like everybody is aware.
Let them play.
So we're going to start with the first question is play important for children, or how important is play for children?
So this is a topic that's actually, it's so near and dear to my heart, because so I didn't mention this before, but my very first job was as a recreation therapist. So it was before I even went back for occupational therapy for my master's in OT. And I worked specifically at a children's hospital in Richmond, Virginia, with kids who lived at the hospital. And my whole role was to play with them and to do community integration. And it was such a sweet time. And yes, play is of the utmost importance for all of us across the lifespan. So one of the main things, first we need to look at then what exactly is play, right? Yeah. So in the OT world, we talk about Adolf Meyer. He was one of the founders of occupational therapy, and he really talked about how there are throughout a day that you need to have a balance of work, play, rest, and sleep. And this has a lot to do with the neurotransmitters and how this affects the brain, right? So work is going to be when you have somewhat of a stress response. Not all stress is bad. Stress helps us to work, and it helps our brains to really function and to learn more and whatever. So we need some work in our life. Play is when we're going to have these happy hormones or endorphins. It's the things that provide excitement to us. So that's going to look different for every kiddo and every person. Again, this goes across the lifespan. And then rest, which rest does not include sitting and watching television, because at that point, your brain is not at rest. Your body might be at rest, but your brain is not. So it's things like sitting to pray for a bit, or to meditate, or to do yoga, or, whatever it is where you're pretty much turning your brain off and allowing it almost to catch up with all of these other things that you've been taking into your body during the day.
Processing, right? Maybe processing.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And sometimes I'm driving in the car, and maybe this isn't when you're supposed to be not as alert, but, but in complete silence, because if you're driving and you're paying attention to what's happening on the road, and you have all this other thing hitting your brain, just that silence for a few minutes is really can be very helpful.
Or the shower, right? The shower is a great place to do your thinking.
And I don't know if it's just me, but I tell you, I have some of my best moments in the shower when I'm like,
exactly.
I need to do this, because you're allowing your brain to rest. So yes, that's a great one. And then sleep, obviously, we all kind of know what sleep is. But so if we're thinking about play and how it is the things that provide us with excitement, again, that's going to look different for everybody. But it's when we're, for lack of a better term, is when we're at our happiest. And so our happiest in our environment. So that's how it's important, because if without it, then our bodies are not having that balance, which then Adolf Meyer, again, I mentioned that he was the one who kind of came up with this whole theory. He postulated that is what starts mental illness, when you do not have this balance here. But it's also, I mean, Charlotte Mason also talks a lot about it. If you read some of her books within the homeschool world, she talks about play as well as when kids are going to be integrating a lot of the things that they learn, and they're just naturally playing it out. They're naturally practicing some of these skills that they learn during their lessons or their work time.
Yeah. So if it's something they enjoy, I mean, and I read too, that when you are in a relaxed state, you learn better. So if you're playing with something or doing something that you enjoy, you're going to learn about it better, or research it, or whatever you want to say, more, do it more, so you understand it better. So that relaxed. So that's really cool. Okay. So now we need those 4 things. It provides a good balance. So play specifically, like, what is it that children gain from actually playing? Like, it is relaxing, and maybe it's a stress reliever, maybe it's the best way to learn, or like one of the, ways that we take in information the best. But, are there other things that we gain from play? Is there developmentally things that happen, or what?
Yeah, so much. So, all right. So when I'm working with families and I'm trying to talk through them, their homeschool day, we always talk about within the person, and then the environment, and then like what their occupation is that they're doing. So the environment really is, so are you in your home? Are you outside? What time of day is it? All of that we can adjust through there. And then the occupation is, what they're needing to do at that point. So if we're thinking the occupation here is play, right? It's just being involved in what they're, what specifically brings this kiddo excitement. So here's our occupation, and our environment we can change and adapt depending on what our need is for that day. But then let's think about within the person, what is play doing for them? So you can think motor skill wise. Okay. Motor skill wise, there's a developmental continuum. Obviously, I'm sure that you've gotten, when you go to the doctor and for your yearly checkup or whatever, and they're like 7 and 8-year-olds should be doing this. And, 18-month-olds should be doing this. But play is when they naturally do a lot of these things. So which then carry over into school, right? We think about, as our kids get older, we want them handwriting, right? So we need to first be able to have the core strength that they need. They need to be able to reach across midline, because as they're writing across a paper, they need to be able to do that. They need to be able to have enough strength here through their, I said core strength, but also here in their shoulders to be stable, so that then they have this mobility here. Like, there's all of these underlying skills that they need to do that they get from play. So we could have them sitting and writing and writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. And then they're probably going to gain some strength within their hands. Or they could be naturally playing outside and they're climbing up a tree and they're picking up acorns and they're taking off the top of it. And they're throwing balls with their friends, whatever. They're getting those same skills that we could force from them through work, but then we're having the cortisol, and we're not having, the positive endorphins, the serotonin. We're not having that. So, and the oxytocin. So what we want to be doing is allowing them that time for play naturally, so that they're building the motor skills. All right. So motor skills are one. Processing skills. So this is kind of our cognitive things. And I'm going to give you a prime example of my son yesterday. So he's 6 and he got this big giant tennis ball for, actually my newly 11-year-old got it for his birthday, and my 6-year-old kind of took it, but whatever. I'll let them handle that on their own. But so he was outside and he started dribbling it. And at first he dribbled it for like 7 or 8 times before it stopped dribbling and it was rolling down. But let me tell you, he was counting those 7 times. Then he decided that he wanted to set his own goal, right? And so he did. He had his goal for 50. So then he had to decide, what do I need to do with my body, which was the motor skills. But then he started counting up, and he could tell whether he was getting from, was he closer to 50? This is task initiation, which is executive functioning skills. This is goal-directed persistence, which is executive functioning skills. It was emotional control, because when he didn't get it, then how did he, he came back and started again, right?
Yeah.
And this was all his own idea within his own little game that he was testing. It wasn't me really working on goal-directed persistence. Okay, we're going to start this and we're going to finish. Plus, not to mention academically, the math that he was doing. We've been working on less than, greater than for a bit, and he naturally did that all on his own. And
that's amazing.
Right, even further, then he started skip counting, because he was like, this is boring to just keep counting. So then he started counting by 2s. So again, like, it's that's these awesome natural skills that he's building by himself.
Yeah, I love that too. And what I was thinking in there, as you said, when he didn't make it and then he had to deal with that and start over again. I mean, that's failure. Like, I didn't make it. When I got it, what am I going to do to keep, you have some kids who will like throw the tennis ball across, that's it, I'm done, whatever. But it come back to it later or whatever. But all these little things, and with the strength building, you were saying earlier, you don't even realize that stuff is building strength for them. So if they're sitting in front of a screen all the time, obviously they're like, what's the word when you lose your muscle? You build muscle, and if you don't use it, it's not decay, atrophy.
There, I was like,
because you're not using your muscles, right? So just and it's easy. It's not like you gotta lift weights or anything, right? You just go out there and do, right?
Right. And I mean, lifting weights, it can, like, for me, honestly, as you get older, like, sometimes that play is within, I mean, that can be play for older kiddos.
Absolutely.
And for, like, I really enjoy going to the gym and exercising in that way. So for me, that's kind of what my play is. But for little guys, it's not typically that, it's more of a, how do I interact around me, and what do I see? So and then even social skills, obviously. So if we're thinking, I like to think of it as if we're looking at motor skills and process skills and social skills, and those are the important or three really important aspects of occupational therapy, but also that include within our occupation here, play. So the social skills of, now granted, that time my kiddo was by himself, but what if somebody else was there and he had to take turns, or if he started bouncing back between them and they were counting, and then what happens if he dropped it and the other friend was mad and he had to take care of it? These are natural things that they're working through with play, versus us really being involved in telling them exactly what they should do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So team stuff, or team sports, or just even with that one other person, or like when your kids have a friend over and that they play with this toy, but they're playing with it and the friend is just watching them play with it. No, how about you? Let the friend play with the toy, right?
Let's do it together. How are we going to figure that out?
Exactly.
All that problem solving, that also all social skills.
So much valuable stuff in there, and all those little things that you don't think of really just build into, all the crawling and the whatever, just all the little bit picking, those little pinchers, they're when their fingers are, and they pinch and they pick up all this tiny stuff, right?
They find every teeny tiny little piece of dust on your floor and try to get them.
I know. And then, but that's all, I mean, that is a skill. That's a really good skill, that whole thing. So all these little things that they're doing is just helping them to develop their person. It's so amazing. So how much time do you think, and this one may vary by age, I don't know, how much time do you think is enough? Like how often should kids be playing? Like, all of us overachieving homeschool moms who are so concerned, of course, in the state of Pennsylvania, about meeting the requirements academically, but there's that balance, there's,
Mhm.
like you said, there's the work and the play and the rest and the
Yeah,
sleep balance. So, what do you think
right.
about?
Yeah, so there isn't a specific, like, this is your developmental stage of how much time that
Mhm,
you should be playing, espe- especially if we think about, like, what is your mindset? Okay, so if we're dividing things up based on what that philosophy was, where we're dividing between work, play, rest, and sleep,
mhm,
and the play is the time that's providing you with the excitement and the stress relief, and
mhm,
um, again, giving you some of those positive, like the positive endorphins, right? So we want to provide that balance enough for our kids so that they do not have too much work, which is giving that all that cortisol, and then you're overstressed.
mhm,
So how do we know what that is? Well, if our kids are overstressed, and we can tell that some by poor eye contact typically, or not
mhm,
being able to, not wanting to engage,
mhm,
not wanting to participate in things that they would previously have enjoyed in or
mhm,
have enjoyed, then we can say, all right, we need a mix here. We need to
mhm,
get back down on the work
mhm,
and increase some of our play time.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
and the younger they are, the more play that they need. I also want to mention, sometimes when we are with our kids all the time, like most of us are, as we're
mhm.
homeschooling, we tend to get in their way. And Charlotte Mason also talks about this, and she was saying, like, in the after her, in her books, she talks about nature study a lot and giving the kids time out there. And I will never forget when I read her book, one of them, and she was talking about, don't get involved, but sit with your own sewing. And I was just imagining myself, like, let me tell you though, I have cross stitched for the first time after I started homeschooling, because I was like, I'm not going to be bothered. But I will use myself as a prime example. And
Mhm.
this was after my daughter Annabelle was born, and she was, I don't know, 2 or 3. And I was telling my mom, now granted, I was already an OT at this point. I was like, she does not play by herself. She's around me all the time. And then yet I would put her up in a room, like, for nap time or whatever, and she would play with all of her dolls, and she would
Oh,
do
yeah.
all of her things all by herself. And my mom was like, yes, Sarah, she can play. You're just getting in her way. Or if I'm there, she wants to engage with me, and that's great. Like, I can watch
Mhm,
her, feed her doll or whatever. But it's not
mhm.
that she couldn't. It's not that I was continuously like, oh, well, look at this, and oh, we'll do
Oh,
this.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I was a
yeah.
bit. I mean, she was my first kiddo, and
Mhm,
I worked a lot. So when I was there, I wanted to be around her and engage with her and
mhm,
whatever. And
mhm,
she said, just, like, start to back out a little bit. Um, and I did that, and starting to make myself busy. I'm not saying, like, sit with your phone in your face, because that's not necessarily a positive thing,
yeah,
but,
yeah.
like, sit in the room, or if you can't leave them
Mhm,
there, but you don't necessarily have to engage all.
mhm,
And so when that was happening, then her play absolutely increased. Her entertaining herself increased. So I think I totally got off topic of how much time it should be.
Well, what I think, well, there's two things that were popping into my head. I mean, it's very easy with your first child to get into, like, entertaining mode, right? Oh, here's the
Right.
child. I better do something with them so they're entertained or they're not upset or whatever. Or if you have a crier and you're like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I think as you increase children or the workload with
Mhm.
homeschool, you have
Mhm.
less time to sit in front of them, so they have to figure it
Right.
out.
Right. Yes.
So yeah, so like you said, getting out of the way. Like, I was thinking, when the kids play outside, I work in the garden,
Yeah.
I'm doing this. You
Yes.
can help me do this if you want to, but if you're not
Yeah.
interested, go do something.
Yeah. Do your own thing. Right.
Yeah,
And be
yeah. And I was
jealous. Yes.
I was thinking with the time, when you were talking about that earlier, what struck me is it really just takes, it's the parents' responsibility then to just observe their
Mhm.
children.
Mhm.
Like you
Mhm.
said, if they're closing in or they're shutting down or whatever, and be like, oh, and figuring out what that is and adjusting what you're
Right.
doing, so that instead of, I can be very guilty of, here's the schedule, this is what we need
Yeah.
to accomplish, and I'm plowing through it until we get
Yeah.
it all done. And if everyone starts to shut down and they're miserable, then obviously there's a little bit
Yeah.
too
They're
much
not
work going
learning
on.
anyway. Right.
And
I mean,
yeah,
they're not taking
exactly,
in.
exactly. They're not taking it in. So, and then it's like, okay, well, either let's just forget all that and go play, or let's figure out a way to do this in a playful way, or whatever. But so it's observation and kind of responsibility on mom and dad's part to find that balance, I guess. It'll be different for everyone.
Yes. There you go. So maybe I didn't get that off topic.
You did. You were right there. It was good. It was really good. So, okay. And then obviously before you said this is not just a little kid thing, although little ones learn through play, like a lot, like mostly. And like, well, one of the things that popped into my head as I was thinking about us meeting is I almost cringe when I see folks ask about curriculum for preschoolers. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
You know, library books, or maybe the library's not so good anymore. So your favorite books, you know, your childhood books, whatever you have, reading, coloring, playing outside, blocks, bead stringing, you know, whatever.
Right.
Those, you know, using your fingers, playing kind of stuff, and curriculum. The word preschool and curriculum, just even kindergarten, you know, it's just like, no. Yeah. So, I mean, that's like, you know, like you're agreeing, you know, like early on.
Yeah, it's very interesting that I do agree. But there are some, like, what is it that brings you excitement, right? Again, because if that's what we're looking at our definition of play is, so what is it that brings you excitement? Like, so my 6-year-old now, he's been around homeschooling like his whole life, basically. We started when he was 1. And so like for him, when we would be sitting down to write some stuff, if he had his own little notebook that he could, you know, feel like he was participating in, like he was playing, you know, he would be coloring, he's drawing, and so no, did I get him a curriculum when I was specifically, you know, trying to work through? No, but he also didn't want to feel left out. So I think if you're looking at like, what is the purpose of it? If the purpose is that we're going to have this very structured time, but we're going to sit down, just me and my 3-year-old, and I'm going to teach him all his letters, like, that's where I'm like, back it up.
Yeah.
But if it's like, this is the atmosphere of our home, and this is how my 3-year-old participates in with us, then have at it. And do it together, as long as, again, it's not giving him all of this extra work time.
Busy work or whatever. So here's a good kind of embarrassing story from my life along those lines. So I have 6 children. My youngest is currently 7. But when he was 4, I was, you know, working with the older kids, and I didn't really have him on my radar yet. I was like, he's 4. We'll get there. And then one day, like, I don't know, halfway through the school year, and maybe it wasn't quite halfway, he's like, Mom, I want to know how to read. You know, and he picked it up fast, because for him it was fun. It wasn't like this, okay, we got to read. It's time to read. You're in kindergarten. It's time to sit down and read this thing. And I kind of forgot. I didn't really forget, but I kind of forgot about him. And he just kind of took it into his own hands. And then he just kind of took off with it. And it was like, wow, like I couldn't even believe. And for him, it was just like this game. And
again, that goes back to that, like, the atmosphere of your home, but also like, what is play for each specific kid? If we're not thinking like a play is only defined by when you are busy and engaged with your toys, you know, that's putting it on on the environment, and it's not looking at what it's doing for the kid. So it's very, very different. What brings your kid happiness? What brings your kid that excitement that's going to be eliciting these neurotransmitters? I keep saying neurotransmitters. Sorry, my mouth is like blah, 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 blah. These endorphins to their that's defines play. So that's an education for us parents, you know, because a lot of times we think, oh, it's toys. It has to be toys, and you're playing with your toys. But no, it could be anything. If they're pretending to be a newspaper person and taking notes, or you know, whatever, writing their own storybooks or whatever, you know, and that's all. I will never forget when I went to Mexico. Like, I was in high school, and this still sticks in my mind. And I went to Mexico on a mission trip, and there was this little kiddo who was sitting outside of his house, and we had been working to build a cinder block house for his family. And he was sitting outside and he had these corn husks that he took off of the corn that they had been making us tamales, right? Yeah, tamales that they make with the corn. Right. So they had been taking off all these husks, and then he took them and he ripped it down. And then he started, like, he was trying to braid through them, and then he was pretending like it was hair. And so, like, it is not that we have this room full of toys that we need to engage our kids.
Yeah.
It's that they are eliciting this response within their brain. They're building all of these skills physically, cognitively, socially. They're building all of these skills because they're naturally doing it.
Wow. Awesome. That's so good. Well, I appreciate you coming on today. I just love talking about this again and again, because it's kind of, some of the concepts are new to my brain, but it's good to be reminded of things and like think of things in a different way.
Yeah.
Hopefully this was really speaking to some of you folks out there, and it was very helpful to you, because it's always helpful to me. So I appreciate you coming and speaking with me, Sarah. I did want to remind you out there in Facebook land that if you are coming to convention, there's going to be a panel session on Friday at 3:30. If you have questions that you've been dying to ask some homeschool veteran about, we will be having a panel. So please come ask us your questions. We will give you answers to the very best of our ability. And if we don't know them on the spot, we will find out the answers for you and get back to you. But 3:30 on Friday at convention, which will be June 10th and 11th this year. So come out and see us. We would love to say hi and see you at the chat booth. And that is it for this episode of Chatting with CHAP. And I believe we will be back in like 2.5 weeks-ish with Dr. Denise Ebersole. She's another friend of mine who is helping with the mentor network that we're setting up. And we'll be talking with you about that. But thanks for coming, Sarah. I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
It's been awesome.
And can I just say, like, where to find me if you guys have more questions too, for sure. You can find me at Homeschool OT on Instagram or www.homeschoolot.com. You can find both there.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. Yeah. Fabulous. Okay. So see you later, Facebook land. Bye.